The Republican Party today is baffling, full of racists, religious nuts, and backed by billionaires hiding behind closed doors who subsidize the culture wars that these Republican politicians launch day after day to try to gin up fear in the racists and religious nuts who vote for them. Now, thankfully, we have Nancy MacLean, who is a Duke Professor on history and public policy and also an author. She's written a book which you can actually go check out. I've linked it for you down in the description below. The book is titled Democracy in Chains: The Deep History of the Radical Right's Stealth Plan for America. Now, MacLean spoke at an event today called How to Beat the Broligarchs. And in this next 10-minute clip you're going to watch of MacLean breaking down the history of the GOP and why it is they're behaving this way, you're probably going to find yourself a little frustrated, but you're also going to be left with a feeling of hope and a feeling of wanting to take part in the fight against the Broligarchs.
The carnival of cruelty that has been in play since 47's re-election has a very deep history. It's sometimes said that a tripod is the most stable structure, and that has certainly been the case for our enduring reactionary partnership in America. Its three member groups, a kind of Venn diagram with obvious overlap, have been first, predatory capitalist, second, white supremacists, and third, religious conservatives led by conservative Protestants oblivious to the ethics of Jesus. They're combined. These folks never encounter the parable of the Good Samaritan, or if they did, they thought it's, oh, love the neighbor who's most like me. Anyway, so the combined power of these three groups has waxed and waned for over 2 centuries. I really feel like we need to dig deep to see how we got to this moment. It surged in the run-up to the Civil War as militant enslavers, America's first predatory capitalists, and a global group at that, aimed to hold power at any cost, including treason that brought on the most violent civil war in the Western Hemisphere. That power was subdued for a time by Reconstruction, then rose again after the members of this troika violently defeated America's first taste of multiracial democracy. During the Great Depression, as we heard earlier, that coalition's partners were routed by militant mass working class movements and new federal policy, only to resurge with the Red Scare after World War II, then be beaten back by the Civil Rights Movement and allied causes in the 1960s and 70s, despite what the Tripod's members proudly called massive resistance to Brown versus Board of Education and beyond. Out of that massive resistance came much more intentional coalition building, as Erica mentioned, over the last 50 years, building toward today's bloody-minded determination and a unified power among these partners not seen since the 1850s. Why so venomous and hell-bent on revolutionizing America now, no matter the toll? This is crucial to understand because all three coalition partners are desperate. They see this as their last chance to impose their grossly unpopular agenda. If you read their stuff, that's what they say. They know they won't get another chance once people get it, hence the reckless frenzy to act fast. And here I just want to say a little bit about each and how they reached this moment. Since the 1990s, predatory capitalists, above all, and it is crucial that we understand this, from the fossil fuel sector, led by Charles Koch, as I described in Freedom Is Not Enough, they have seen their trillions in investments and expected future profits imperiled by social movements and international government action, just like the enslavers before them. So they have deliberately cultivated partners with much bigger followings. White supremacists who had never accepted civil rights victories then panicked at the election of Barack Obama in 2008 because they rightly saw the imminent end of white numerical and cultural dominance in a multiracial democracy. And the religious right leaders had lost the ability to impose their dogma on their own straying children who can't take it anymore and have fled the pews in droves, let alone all women and government policy. So they have radicalized into Christian nationalists, especially since the pandemic, and many of them played driving roles in the attack on our country on January 6th. Well, they fear most the vast majority of the people, not only in this country, but around the world, because they understand that their agenda is terribly unpopular, as I just tried to explain. So again, I think it's really important to center ourselves with the recognition, and trust me, I read their stuff so you don't have to. They talk about their desperation, and they show it, and they're showing it now in the vengeful rage of this counter-revolution as they depict it and understand it. They think we've made a revolution, they're doing counter-revolution. So these big billionaire donors on the right, Charles Koch, Leonard Leo, Bradley, Scaife, etc., they have invested fortunes to keep this coalition's partners marching in line together. So those investments culminated in their joint production of Project 2025, which the Trump administration is now imposing at breakneck speed after his lies that he wouldn't. And also, as we've talked about, the early investors have now been bolstered by the billionaire Broligarchy of Silicon Valley, and above all, and this is really important to remember their origins, the South African apartheid spawn, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, who have never shed the ideology that their families moved to South Africa to support. So these combined forces are taking aim at every progressive achievement over a century now, and I described the playbook for this in Democracy in Chains, but also every public good, from education to the Postal Service, Social Security and Medicare, to national parks and libraries. And what we need to understand, and urgently, is where all this ends if they have their way. And I will say it plainly. It ends in economic eugenics. Economic eugenics. Using their power over government to, as Musk says of the federal workforce, cull the population. Each partner in this hydra-headed coalition believes that they have a right to dominate and to trample those they consider less valuable, expendable people. People whose voices should be silenced in school, at work, and in politics. The predatory billionaires talk endlessly about IQ and genes and sneer at the low wealth people who they refer to, and Elon Musk has said it publicly, as parasites. The white supremacists, I think we know well at this point, and the Christian nationalists share a Calvinist conviction that God favors the wealthy and that it is a sin to help the damned. So all three partners are also committed to keep drilling for oil and gas until the climate collapses. And this is a unifying thread among all the strong men that are in operation today, and it's not an accident, as I'll get to in 1 second. Some European thinkers have used the term fossil fascism for what we're facing, and I believe that's apt because it's also global, with transnational allies everywhere enlisting and aggravating racism, nativism, gender anxiety, and homophobia in order to achieve an authoritarian oligarchy that they cannot win by persuasion. And could I get the next slide up, the map? Our predatory capitalists in the US have combined with others in the Anglophone world since 1981 to create a global movement of this cause. It is called the Atlas Network. I know I don't have time to go into it, but it is huge. It has over 500 partners now in over 100 countries, driven by these kind of dirty industry donors, making marriages with the homophobes and the anti-feminist groups like Alliance Defending Freedom, pushing immigration rights, fighting against indigenous rights in Australia and New Zealand. I could go on, but they are very determined, very much carrying the kind of ideology that I've talked about here. And I think if we know this, they are actually tremendously vulnerable. Because again, remember, this is a minority. They know the majority doesn't want their world. That is why they must leverage every prejudice that they can pour gasoline on kindling of whatever it is in the particular society they operate. So we need to fight this new fascism like the world depends on us, because in fact it does.